Hi, I'm Kelly Mari, and I am doing my paper on women who kill because of domestic violence situations. So I have titled this PowerPoint Justifiable Homicide with a question because is it or is it not? So before we begin talking about different cases of women who did kill their husbands or their boyfriends, we're going to talk a little bit about what is domestic violence. Domestic violence can include physical and or sexual abuse, mental or emotional abuse, financial or spiritual abuse, and isolation and male privilege. Power control wheel out of Duluth, Minnesota. There have been some modifications on this, but basically it's the same. There's intimidation. Men use intimidation to get the women to do what they want. They walk through the door. The woman doesn't know how he's going to react. Did he have a good day? Did he have a bad day? She's intimidated. She's afraid of him because of the past behaviors he's shown to her. And that's not a good place to be. And it's certainly not healthy in a relationship. Emotional abuse and mental abuse can go together, and they can cover so many things. One would be just telling her she's ugly, she's worthless, she's fat, nobody would want her, that she's lucky that he's with her because she's so hideous. I mean, it can just go on and on. Verbal abuse isn't on this power and control wheel that I put, but we can't forget the verbal abuse, putting her down, calling her names, making her feel bad about herself. A lot of that with emotional abuse. Economic abuse, withholding money, not allowing her to buy things that she needs. While maybe he's going out and buying new cars, spending money on drugs and alcohol, but he doesn't even let her have money to buy the children clothes. Using male privilege, I'm the man, you're the woman, therefore I'm more important than you. You don't have the right to do anything except for what I tell you you can do. Coercion, making them do things, sometimes even illegal activities because of what they want, whatever they want them to do. They'll talk the woman into doing it, and if she doesn't do them what he's asking, she could be hurt, and she knows that. Isolation is another one, a form of abuse, keeping her from her friends, her family, not allowing her to go outside, making her stay in the house, making her quit her job, holding her accountable for every moment of her time. I want to talk a little bit about learned helplessness and learned optimism. When you think about learned helplessness, I think a lot of people have in mind that you just learn to be helpless because of all of the battering that has taken place, all of the put downs, all the verbal abuse, everything else. You just learn that, okay, this is just what my life is about. But that is not what Lenore Walker had in mind when she created learned helplessness. She wants it's getting used to having the same outcome, but wanting to have that changed. And excuse me for stumbling over my words. I can't see all of my notes, and I'm new at this. But Seligman, he promotes learned optimism, and it's the human resilience to move past the traumatic events that devastate some, but others warrior through it. We all want that. We don't want to be in a state of helplessness. We want to be optimistic. But when you are in a battering situation, it is probably pretty impossible to feel optimistic. You do kind of learn, okay, this is what my life is. And sometimes, yes, it could seem like you're helpless. But it's what you do that's going to make a difference. I'm going to talk a little bit about some specific accounts of abuse. This is probably the most interesting part of my research, was to read specific cases. When I hear about people killing their husbands because of abuse, I always wonder, is it just an excuse? And then there have been things that I have read, and I didn't include those, but it seemed like it was an excuse that maybe there really wasn't domestic violence. But you know what? I wasn't there. I don't know. But these cases that I'm talking about here went to court, and they were tried before a judge and a jury, and we'll talk about the outcomes. Sheila, she was 3 months pregnant. Her husband picked up a pan of macaroni from the table. She'd just taken her pots and pans and stuck them on the table instead of putting them in bowls. I do that. I think it saves dishes. I don't want to wash them. She probably had the same idea in mind. She's 3 months pregnant. Her husband didn't like that, so he hit her in the head with the pan. He knocked her out of the chair. Pot doesn't belong on the table, he says. When she was 8 months pregnant, she forgot to buy her husband ding-dongs. He liked them in his lunch. He verbally abused her by telling her she was fat and unattractive, but then accused her of flirting with a checkout boy. He gave her 10 minutes to return to the store and get his ding-dongs. 10 minutes wasn't long enough. She couldn't make that deadline. So he slammed the sack out of her hands, and he pushed her against the wall, and he choked her over the ding-dongs. His sister was watching their child. The child fell and got hurt. All Sheila did was tell her husband how it happened, and he beat her because he felt she was criticizing his family. One time he knocked her down. She fell on their child. The child got hurt, and he beat her because the child got hurt. Then there was the time that there was no reason apparent. He took her to a bar. He got home. He demanded she go into the bedroom and take her clothes off. He put the shotgun next to her and forced her to perform oral sex. He then forced her out of the residence, and she was only wearing her undergarments. Another time, they were at a bar. She wanted to go out and get some fresh air. He started screaming in front of other people. He made a scene. He accused her of not wanting to be with him. People tried to interfere, but she knew it would only get worse if she just didn't get him home. But when they got home, he beat her and he raped her. One time, she wasn't there when he got home. He called around to find out where she was. Her family let her know he was looking for her. She knew she was going to be in trouble. She called him, and he said, "You need to leave the kids with your mother." She knew what was going to happen. She knew he was going to beat her, but she wanted to protect her children, so she went home. He beat her multiple times. Her mother came over. She saw the bruises. She saw the disarray in the home, and she looked at her and said, "You and your husband need to work out your problems." And she left the children with them. She did not stop the abuse. The final incident, Glenn discovered Sheila was having an affair. She was pregnant with another man's child. When Glenn was drunk, he was drunk when he dragged Sheila into the living room by the hair, and he told her he was going to kill her. He shared how much he hated her, and he blamed her for everything. You see, they had some children with special needs. One had leukemia, and another had cystic fibrosis, I believe. There was a lot of stress in this family. But he blamed her for it. He pulled her by the hair in the bathroom. He forced her head in the toilet. He asked her if she had enough. Actually, his words were, "Have you had enough, bitch?" And she replied, "Yes, I have." He took her out and he made her sit in that chair, and he told her to think about what he was going to do to her. He continued telling her how she was going to look deceased. He even had a picture of a dead child in a casket and said, "That's what you're going to look like when I kill you." She experienced this terror all night long. He would go to sleep, and then he would get up and terrorize her some more. Sheila called her boyfriend, and she asked him to bring a gun and hide it behind the house. He didn't want to, but she said she needed it for protection. He asked her not to use it. She taped that gun to the bottom of a chair. When Glenn woke up and continued his terrorization, he found the gun when he was flipping her over backwards in the chair. He saw it and asked her what she was going to use it for. And she said, "For my protection." So he put it in her mouth and said, "Bang." But then he ordered her to bed and gave her the gun. He went back to sleep on the couch, and she shot him as he slept. Sheila was sentenced to 8 years for that. In 1978, Indiana prosecutor James Kaiser refused to charge a man with murder, despite the fact that in front of a witness, he beat his ex-wife so severely she was lying there dying, and then he raped her as she was dying. The prosecutor said he didn't mean to kill her, he just wanted to give her a good thumping. But what happens when the batterer is a police officer? Carol Stonehouse and William Welsh, they were both police officers. They met. She was still married. He was recently divorced from two different marriages. Shortly after they began dating, he became violent and very possessive. He'd put sugar in her gas tank, and he'd let the air out of her tires when she didn't do as he told her to do. He would break into her apartment. He'd break her things. He'd cut up her clothing, even urinated on her bed. He left flowers telling her they were for her funeral. She reported these incidents multiple times, over and over, but the police wouldn't arrest him. He was one of theirs. So was she, but evidently the male privilege won out. It went on for a long time. He even broke her nose and attempted to run over her. Still, he was not charged. The night of his death, he repeatedly came to her apartment and he threatened her. She thought she heard him shooting at her, and she fired her gun, killing him. And she was convicted of third-degree homicide and sentenced to 7 to 14 years in prison. Battered women fighting back. Is it justice or murder? I watched a very fascinating video called Battered Women Fighting Back. One of the stories was Jane Abbott, a mother of 4. She hired a hitman to kill her husband. When I saw the video of her, she looked like a very sweet grandma. She was sentenced to life for murder. She said, "I saved 4 lives when I had him killed." She and her children reported the regular beatings that they endured, and one of her sons said, "That was our life, to live in fear." The state of Ohio did not allow battered women's syndrome or domestic violence to be entered into a defense trial as defense, but the prosecutor stated in an interview that he could understand domestic violence and battered women's syndrome, but because she hired somebody else to kill her husband and didn't kill him herself, then he couldn't buy the theory that she was afraid because she took the time to write the check. Ogle and Jacob said, people look at the homicide as the most important event that happened, but what is most important is to take a look at the precipitating events. Homicide doesn't start at that moment. It starts before. It starts when the man starts the battering, the verbal abuse, the economic abuse, the isolation, all of that. This book is Self-Defense and Battered Women Who Kill, and it is also another really good read. Linda Logan was acquitted of killing her husband after the court allowed her attorney to use domestic violence as a defense. Her husband's life ended when he went after their 14-year-old daughter, and Logan shot him to death. Her attorney said she had no resources and nowhere to go. She divorced him and he wouldn't leave. He told her things would be different and better, and they eventually remarried. But things weren't better and different. She still visits his grave, and she still feels guilty. He still has a hold over her. Lorena Bobbitt may be one of the most famous women in America. She cut off her husband's penis after she claimed he raped her. She was acquitted for reasons of insanity and sentenced to 45 days in a mental health hospital. Her husband was acquitted of sexual assault. There were witnesses who said they saw her husband beating her and that they saw the bruises on her body. Her husband continued to deny that he was ever an abuser. What can we do to prevent more deaths? We can listen to women, the women who tell their stories, the women who share what's happening to them. We can believe them. We can be more aware of the situations around us and step in if something doesn't seem safe or right. But I caution you to be careful because it's dangerous. The police officers will tell you the most dangerous times they have is when they go into a home and there's domestic violence. It really puts people at risk. And the interesting thing is, So many times they go because the woman calls, and when they go to arrest the men, the women attack the officers. They don't want their husbands to go to jail. Be safety first. We can educate our children about respecting themselves and others. We can model relationships, healthy relationships to our children. We can teach them what it's like to really respect a woman and what it's really like to have a man respect you. We can be advocates for those who've experienced violence. We can stand up for them. We can honor them, honor their stories, and help them as they travel that road of recovery. We can be change agents by lobbying for funding for shelters and providing documented research to our communities and legislators. Be active in your community. Share with your local senators, your local representatives. Tell them about domestic violence. Give them personal examples so that they understand that it's a really important topic and cause in our community, in our state, in our nation. We can volunteer at shelters. We can help those women that need us. We can show compassion and understanding, show them that we care, and again, that we believe them, and we can be non-judgmental. I hear so often that the thing people say the most is, why didn't they leave? They could have left. Any of these women could have left. It's not that easy when you're battered and you believe that there are no resources. When he tells you that he's going to kill you or kill your family or keep your children from you, it's scary, it's frightening, and the women have been, it's been ingrained in them. They believe it. He will destroy everything in his path. Don't be judgmental. Understand. Share your resources. Give people options. I hope that you enjoy this presentation. It's most certainly not the most joyful thing that I've ever talked about, and it's a subject that I'm really passionate about. I worked, as I said, with victims of domestic violence and sexual assault for a few years for Alaska Family Services in Palmer, and then I worked as a probation officer supervising those men who abused the women that I had worked with. Ironically enough, it's a sad state, and I just hope that we can put an end to the violence and definitely put an end to the silence. Share our stories and heal. Thank you.